Seeing none? Okay, good morning, everybody. A nice, bright, sunny day, and we're doing a walk on the Champlain trails later. So hope you can join us. So this morning we have two new councillors and one veteran, Chris Mayne. New councillors Jamie Lowery and Gary Gardiner, and you've had a few months to get your feet wet, so to speak. So we're interested in how do you feel about things so far? What are your surprises? How do you see the direction of council right now, and how are you serving community? What's it look like? So that's a lot, right? So if you just each say a little bit about your tenure so far, and then we'll move from there. We'll go in alphabetical order. So Chris, you're first. And you can show your photos while you're at it. If they're
sure. Okay. So
you have to share screen.
Here we go. So here we go. Just be a moment here. So share screen. Slideshow from beginning. There we go. So everyone can see that great picture of me and Harriet.
And that is Caleb from Kiwanis.
So almost. That's Kiwanis President Justin Wegelius.
Oh, well, it's close.
Yes, there you go. So back in the good old days when we used to meet at Calvin.
Right.
And hopefully look forward to meeting again in person at some point. But pleasure to be here this morning. And to see everyone. So pleasure to be back on council. I think for anyone who followed the election last fall, for the first three polls, I was deputy mayor, but then all the other voters showed up, and Maggie, Lana, and Justin went first, second, and third. And congratulations to them. They're doing a great job. So Lana is now chair of infrastructure and operations. That's something I was fortunate enough to chair for about 8 years. But I'm very happy working with Lana and letting her take the reins, and she's doing a great job. That's probably still the biggest commitment for myself. I think, as most people are aware, it's hard not to be aware of it. One of the big decisions before infrastructure and operations, and it's shared with community services, is the not really named yet, but the Omichelle Community Center. So where that is in the process right now, it's gone to tender. We're hoping those results to come back in about a month. And at that point, depending on where the price is, council will make the decision. The professional estimate is for about $52 million. We're hoping that if it comes back close to that, we will move forward. If it's significantly higher than expected, then that's a new discussion. But that's certainly one of the big discussions we've had so far. And I think I'm in the minority this morning, but I think, depending on the price, there may be more support. So certainly community center is one of the big issues right now. This time of the year, surprisingly, the sanders and plows were on the road again last night, which, is unusual for this time of the year, but infrastructure and operations, winter maintenance is a big part of the budget. It was a slow start to the winter, but it's actually been fairly busy. So there is some nervousness that we're going to expend the complete budget this year and even dip into the reserves, which are almost negligible already, but we'll see how the year finishes. Everyone's favorite time of the year for potholes. One point I like to mention on potholes is that under provincial standards, we're allowed 4 days to actually repair them. As soon as it's called in, you've got 4 days to repair it. And so long as you can do that, the municipality isn't held liable for anyone who hits a pothole too hard and does some damage to their car. So typically here we might get 60 to 70 applications for compensation for wheel damage, but typically it's less than 5 that we actually end up having to pay, because as long as we meet that minimum maintenance standard, getting repaired within 4 days, the city's not deemed liable. Still under infrastructure and operations is the landfill up at Merrick, which is a huge issue. We're constantly kind of planning how to extract the methane, flare it off, and plan for the future. So that's a a significant piece of infrastructure and operations. Drinking water is a huge issue, and I'm not sure how much everyone actually follows that right now, but so certainly one of the most important responsibilities of any council is to provide clean, safe drinking water to a community. And for anyone who's followed it, it is public to a large degree. There has been polyfluoroalkylated PFAS tracked in the water coming down Lee's Creek and into our drinking water supply. So that's something there are studies ongoing with right now as to how to best treat that, because our current facility, the ceramic membranes don't capture any of the PFAS chemicals at all, but it's expected within the next year or two, based on a study that's expected out shortly, in terms of recommending how do we treat it. Activated charcoal is the likely outcome, but it could also be reverse osmosis, ionization. That's a significant decision we're waiting to come before council in the next few months. And of course, water treatment is an ongoing investment, huge important piece of the city, that we draw the water from Trout Lake and we discharge it back into Nipissing. But again, that's all infrastructure and operations. Another board I sit on that's very active these days is DSAB, Social Services. And I would say the hot button issue there for everyone around the table is homelessness. It was raised as a primary issue in the last election. The province has been investing significant money in the community to address it, but it's not just a North Bay issue. This is something that is province-wide, if not nationwide, but North Bay has been making, you wouldn't always think it to look around the city, but we have been making some progress to address it, but it is a long-term significant issue. Within DSAB, I sit as the chair of NDHC, which oversees about 900 units in the community. The largest one is Edgewater. So these are subsidized accommodations for people who can't afford full rents. And, again, there are about 900 various units, townhouses, individual houses, small apartment buildings that are part of the NDHC portfolio that, again, provide an important service to the community. DSAB also oversees and recently just took on the ambulance service. It's now run by DSAB, where it used to be shared municipal and provincial. Now it's run strictly by the DSAB board. Conservation Authority, pleased to sit there. I've been there for about 10 years and enjoyed that one very much. One piece we did last fall was rename Marathon Beach to after Chief Zabagizik. I'm still working the pronunciation, but he was the historical Nipissing family's chief at the time of the signing of the Robinson-Huron Treaty. We spoke with Nipissing First Nation as there's someone they'd like to recognize in the area, and his name came to the fore, and there's a terrific granite marker now at what used to be Marathon Beach, which is now called Zabagizik Beach. Good old Council Home, still very active. If anyone's been by there lately, the steel is now out of the ground where you can actually see the second floor. That was the kickoff. Shovels in the ground about 2 years ago, but I'm still on the Council Home Board as vice chair. Councillor King is chair, but still very active on that one, and glad to see it coming forward. Council Arms, which is a separate organization that oversees independent accommodations for seniors. I chair that. Jamie is here, and he's actually the CEO of Castle Arms, who have 5 buildings in this area, one in Mattawa, that provide individual independent senior living. And there's a significant announcement coming out this evening at tonight's meeting. And then in addition to council, I'm still on Kiwanis, very active there. Citizen of the Year is coming up in a couple of weeks. Triathlon's coming up in June. And I'm also involved with the Dion Quinn Sport and Friends of the Lost Portages. And that was it for me.
All right. Hey, Gary, thank you for that, Chris.
No, always pleased to.
Overview.
Yeah, if you want more pictures, just give me a topic and I'll bring like 100.
Okay, I'll remember that. Gary Gardiner. Hi, Gary. How are you? You're muted, Gary. If you could unmute, please.
There is that. Yeah, I was
That's
just
it.
going to ask that question.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for inviting me. And yeah, it's been, I think we're almost 6 months into the new council. We got 3.5 more years to go. So it's still a long way. So we got lots of opportunities to try and make a difference in the way council operates. So, you know, my initial impressions, I'll just go through a couple of them. In terms of budget process, you know, we spent some time on that, and behind the scenes, people don't realize, but staff did bring the levy down quite a bit before it ever came to council. So there was a lot of work on trying to reduce costs, right? But but the frustration still lies that we increased our overall expenses by 5.5%. And even though we use reserves to bring down the levy, so less impact on the taxpayers that are suffering this this inflationary trends and increased costs everywhere, we still have to get to the root cause of increasing costs. You know, it's hard to control. And amazingly enough, if you look at the 5.5%, over 2% of that is staff related increases that, you know, that are required as part of the collective agreement and the benefit programs and stuff. So 2% of that increase is staff rate of way. And the other interesting thing is almost out of our hands to control is ABCs, which was more than 3%. So add those two together, and you can see we pretty well flatlined internally inside of the City Hall. But we have to still find a better, first of all, method of doing budgets, because it's not really apparent that we have any real impact on it. At the stage it comes to us, it's almost impossible to go, you know, through line by line and cut a, you know, a little bit here and there, but we need significant changes on how we do budget process. And so the other part of this this piece will be the operational review that you know, Councillor Lowery put a motion forward early in our term to have this operational review, which is going to go department by department and look at ways that we can save money, ways that we can use innovation technology to change the way we do things. And so that particular item is going to be an external review, and the tender apparently is going out fairly soon. So hopefully we're going to make progress on that area as well. So that's just kind of my inside view of the way I saw City Hall at the beginning of my term. So I'll just close by, because I don't want to take a lot of time. Jamie's a big talker too. So I sit on the airport board, which I found fascinating. And I know Chris he was a previous council rep on that board. And so it's really a fun board, because we're trying to reinvent ourselves up there and figure out how in aviation, you know, how we can make that airport be self-sustaining now that we're losing significant passenger revenue. You know, there's not the same flights as there used to be, and so we have to figure out how we can generate more revenue. So that's kind of exciting, and we're working on that. But you know, passenger revenue is down, and that's just the nature of today's world post-pandemic. So that's one challenge that I thoroughly enjoy. I sit on the heritage board, buildings, looking at buildings and stuff. So I'm not appointed, but I go to that meeting. I'm on accessibility board as well, which I'm working through stuff with them. So anyway, the other thing that, in terms of, I'm not on all these big committees, which is great, because in the background I'm working on various things like homelessness, you know, and I meet quite a bit with people in the community. And so it's frustrating, because we're making very slow progress on that area. And I already, you know, I watch the various groups vie for control of certain issues. So it slows it down, because there is this is my my area that you shouldn't be in, and so it's frustrating from that standpoint. So anyways, behind the scenes I can push. Lana's certainly her and I talk quite often about all the issues and trying to figure out how we're going to move that forward. And so there is a committee being formed, the ad hoc committee on social issues, that will have 5 councillors on to try and push kind of this agenda and advocate for some changes there. So that's just a quick summary of what I'm doing, and any questions I'm happy to answer as well. So
Thank you very much, Gary. And I just want to pass on a compliment to you from someone I had 52 coffees with yesterday.
okay.
It's Mike Savatosky. And he said that you spend a lot of time doing research, and everybody better be telling the truth, because you've done your homework and you've done your research. And so that was a compliment, I think. And thank you for running, and thank you for, for the next 4 years. I hope they're serving community is probably the biggest thing. So in my opinion, so thank you so much. You might be all 3 councillors might be happy to know that Northern Pines, through Brian Eade, is doing formed a team for Clean Green Beautiful, and they'll be doing weekly pickups. So we've given them a toolkit, and I'm going to be with them on Saturday to do a pickup with that team. And they are also looking at a community garden, and we're really happy about that too. So we all belong in this community, and I thought it would be lovely for you all to know that they are wanting to serve as well. Jamie, you're on. Oh, Jamie, I got to say to everybody, Jamie sits on the Clean Green Beautiful committee, and also he's my co-chair for Communities in Bloom.
Right. Thank you. And that's, I mean, those are the fun parts of the job. I can tell you the lots of committee work, but the 2 that I really enjoy are Clean Green Beautiful and the DIA, because they're really good fits for my skill set, I think. Bit of a background for those that don't know. Before coming to North Bay, I was a commissioner for community services in Brampton. So I ran fire, parks, recreation, arts and culture, a fairly big portfolio with, with a lot of staff. And then coming here, my closest ally, I think, would have been Chris Mayne for Castle Home. And certainly Chris and Mark, really were battle driven when it comes to getting that project done. And I really do think a lot of their efforts and the fact that they have worked so hard for seniors, particularly in North Bay. But coming to council and with my background and sort of senior person, I'm similarly aligned with Gary. I do find it a bit frustrating, and Chris and I have talked about that. The city itself, the inner workings itself, is not. In my opinion anyway, not a hugely sophisticated group, not from a personnel standpoint, but primarily from a business perspective or an enterprise. I mean, here's a $120 million, $150 million organization that doesn't have a financial backbone system. So they really don't have an idea about what things cost. And really the measuring tool has either been you're either below budget or above budget, over budget. I mean, that to me, it's a bit frightening, because when you run an enterprise, and it was similar at Castle Home, you have to know where your costs are, where your exposures are when it comes to an organization, because that's truly, like, I do believe everybody at the city is doing the work that they've been hired to do, but they simply don't have the tools in order to make those, better decisions when it comes to delivering services. So, back in, I'm going to say early 90s, and when I was with Markham, I mean, I could tell you almost to the penny what a hectare of grass cost cut. And that may not seem like an important sort of stat, but when you can change one dial or change the equipment or the methodology in which you deliver that service, there's savings and economies that you can achieve by understanding those kinds of that kind of information. So to me, with Gary, is, the organizational review will definitely reveal something. They'll be doing some comparative, but there's three main thrusts that are going to really, I think, turn the city's fortunes around. One, as Gary mentioned, is the operational review, which should be going out. The secondly is they're about to launch into what they call ERP, which is enterprise resource planning. So they'll know exactly, start to tie all the departments together, all the operation together, because there's a lot during budget. There's a pot of money over here for this particular function, which doesn't relate to this function, which relates to things like utilization. So that's underway. And then finally, the CAO search. I'm of the mind that, we really need someone who's dynamic, is a leader, and, has a vision that can work with council to understand what the priorities are of our community. There was a lot, and I'll just take the Castle Home, issue as an example. I mean, if we didn't realize how important that piece of infrastructure was, and yet, Chris and Mark, dragged them along kicking and screaming for those issues and to get that project underway. It seems to me, that some of those folks are a bit tone deaf when it comes to what the priorities are in the community. And similarly with, there is some progress being made with the mental health and addiction and homelessness, but again, it's a crisis issue, impacts Castle Street and certainly downtown. So, getting that organized and getting some movement there is really, really important, because that's your calling card. Clean, Green, Beautiful on the Communities in Bloom. We're really going to showcase the evolution of North Bay, and it really starts at that waterfront, really from the early goings and railroads, and it's a trip through the history of. And the one thing that's really bubbled to the surface, and Harriet may have shared with you in other meetings, but every accomplishment that has been successful in the city of North Bay has involved the community.
Absolutely.
It really has been that relationship between the community and business, quite frankly. And the city really is, a facilitator, or should be a facilitator of that, not necessarily leading all that sort of things, but being that partner that helps you connect the dots. But it's interesting when you look back on when we went through all of the sites that the judges are going to see, that was really the key ingredient, is how much participation and how much open the community was for involvement, which really had changed the fortunes of North Bay. And that's really going to be, you get the Heritage Gardeners, there's just so many things that maybe people don't really realize that the community was behind. And so, it's important to recognize that. And that's what I'm looking for with council, is a lot more of that community involvement, and that, I campaigned on the transparency piece. And so that's really where I'm pushing, is that transparency, and we can get more of it. We can get more bang for our buck if we treat the city of North Bay, the operations component of it, more like an enterprise that understands that citizens are the stakeholders, and we have to have a high degree of community or customer service attitude when it comes to serving people, as opposed to, penalizing and finding and inspecting, and like those certainly, safety measures certainly have to be in place for public safety, but making City Hall a lot more welcoming and embracing people. Like, I'm astounded, quite honestly. The other thing that I think at some point somebody's going to have to address is, like, City Hall is probably, the grounds are probably the most sterile piece of the city's infrastructure. It's not like, that should be a place where things happen and people can come and actually feel comfortable and those kinds of things. I walk outside, it looks like there was nuclear war out there. It's just very sterile, and that was I guess over the time has been kind of a cost saving thing. Let's cut the flowers out. Let's get, but you know what? That's an idea for our community to sort of say, look, we're proud of our city. We want to be welcoming. And so those are just a few things that, again, so there's some inner working stuff that I'm trying to push for. Chris was right. I'm not a fan of the arena, only because not even the price tag as much as I really believe that things have to function properly and they have to work just on the basic, circulation and making sure you are able to leverage every square inch of a building. If your public money is going in there, it should be, more available to citizens. It should have programming for seniors, not just, and I'm a almost fanatic ice hockey coach. My team's going to Toronto this weekend for the championship, but I even that there's more to North Bay than those kinds of things. And so back to one of Chris's comments, we're hoping with Harriet's help that there's going to be a very significant announcement coming out of Castle Arms fairly soon, and it really will serve seniors in an unbelievable manner. And not just housing, but there's some real things in there that will make life as a senior, and not just frail seniors, like people that are a little bit older, a lot easier and a lot more affordable. So it's a big push, and I think with Chris's leadership, I mean, we don't always agree on things, but I can tell you he is committed to the community. He's committed to particularly to seniors under his leadership. These things, this campus, we're going to be effectively the Canadian leaders on how to treat our aging population. So
Sorry, I got carried away.
Chris,
Well, I dare I say the words out loud? Community hub.
Yeah, you could say that. You could
Can
say
I
that.
say that out loud?
And again,
As this group is looking for this, we're looking for those kinds of things.
It really is a doozy, and the other thing is that I'll give you one little teaser is that there's a couple of business people that want to invest, and when I say invest, which is really fundraising to create assisted living for seniors, which means so those people that can't afford Barclay, can't afford Marina Point, can't afford the Empire, will have a place that they can honest accommodation that will have all the same amenities as those kinds of places. But you are going, for those that are on old age security or a very limited pension, those kinds of spaces are being developed again under I don't want to blush because under Chris's leadership. So really thoughtful design process. So and he probably should have been deputy mayor, but anyway, he didn't maybe he didn't do enough door knocking. I don't know.
Thanks for rubbing that in, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. And I want to just add that one thing, and this is what Jamie and I have had this conversation 20 years ago. We the good news is that when we went into Communities in Bloom, we had two people on council or in staff participating in the unfolding of Communities in Bloom for 5 years. And then this time we have all the senior management, or quite a few, at the table with us. That's the good news. The bad news is that if you look at municipalities who are competing in Communities in Bloom, it's led by the municipality, not by an outside organization usually. So that's another piece, but I just am so pleased that we are actually coming together as a community to collaborate and to make and to be successful. Well, it'll be successful if we see the whole community engaged. And right now, just for our councillors' knowledge, we're over 1,200 bags ordered in a week, in 2 weeks for, that have been delivered, that are being delivered by some of our members. And that's huge. That's right on par. It's actually a little lower than before, but that tells me that we're maybe a little bit tidier than we were before. And so, you know, it's not about the litter as much as it is about we're engaging community. And I think that's awesome. So we're going to open the questions, and Roseanne had her hand up. Go ahead, Roseanne.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Chris and Gary and Jamie. The information, I so much appreciate it. You all come from a little bit different perspective, and I think that makes a good council. I have a question, and this would be more a budgetary question. Recently, I've been traveling down Trout Lake Road, and the asphalt there seems to have all been worn away. There's great big center pockets that are missing, like it's gone down to the second layer. Trout Lake Road was actually surfaced not that long ago. I want to know what the commitment is from tenders, or what your expectations are when you award these tenders. Would they be responsible for resurfacing that at their cost versus our cost? Because I don't think we got great bang for our buck with that surfacing on Trout Lake Road. And that cost the city a lot of money. Anybody can answer.
Chris,
Well,
go
sure.
ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so that's fairly directly under infrastructure and operations. I'll be glad to check. I haven't noticed that myself. So I'm not sure if it's just seasonal wear and tear, but I agree, it's early in the process. But with the tenders, yes, there are requirements that the asphalt lasts for a certain period of time without expensive maintenance. So I'd be glad to have a look at it, see what's going on.
How long is that, Chris? What is the expectation?
I'd have to go into the contracts and find,
Okay.
I'm gonna say at least 2 to 4 years. And the section from Mountain View down to Lees Road was just surfaced last year. There may even be more resurfacing to be done.
I think there is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
They're going to almost not, I think, this year. I think that whole section is being redone.
okay, yeah. So, and I'll be glad to confirm that, Roseanne, and shoot you an email, but
Thank you.
Okay, Gary, did you want to comment?
Yeah, so Chris, you might be able to answer this as well, but I believe when we tender for those types of resurfacing contracts, there's different levels of or quality of asphalt that you can buy. So if you spend more money, there's more additives and materials that make it last longer. So I think it's a trade-off sometimes, how much we spend versus how long it lasts. So Chris, you might know more on that because you've been there for quite some time.
yeah, so just as a comment, about 6 years ago, there was a push to use more recycled asphalt in the resurfacing projects around the community. And that deteriorated fairly quickly, which was unexpected to everybody. So I know we do try and minimize our use of the recycled asphalt. But, you know, again, I'd have to go back and check with engineering as to what the actual requirements were in the contract. But yeah, it shouldn't be disintegrating this quickly. No, I absolutely agree.
Okay, go. Thank you, councillors. Go ahead, Pauline.
I agree with Roseanne with what she had mentioned, and I also agree with Gary with the quality. Just another street that I wanted to point out is Cedar Heights, the one that goes to, you know, beautiful Canadore College. We have city buses that have to run on that, and obviously that was probably recycled products for that road as well. Huge potholes on that road.
You kind of bounce over them, right?
Or fall into them.
Not good for my new car. Anyways, okay, other questions, please?
There's some good questions in the chat, Harriet.
Yeah, I see them. Okay, all right, here's the increase is 3.2 to the homeowner. And 5, but the actual is really 5.5. That's what you're saying, Gary?
Yeah. So when we look at our expenses, they've gone up by 5.5%. And as I mentioned in the chat line, We use some reserves to bring that number down to 4.6. And then when you consider new assessment, so new tax revenue, that impact on decreases the impact on the homeowner to 3.2%. Basically, that's what your overall your tax levy would or your taxes will go up by. So
Claire's question, how much is council involved in police and fire department budgets? For example, do you get information on effectiveness of 24-hour shifts for firemen, cost savings, or how hiring new officers help policing with the increased mental issue problems that arise? Anyone?
Okay, I'm happy to take a stab at that one. So I'll talk fire first of all. So first thing, everything we do is pretty much required by legislation and subject to labor agreements. So there is not a lot of flexibility there. The 24-hour shifts were as one example, the 24-hour shifts were a real concern 3 or 4 years ago when they were first proposed. But reality is, in the labor arbitration process these days, as soon as one community, anywhere in the community in the province agrees to it, and I think it was Chatham that agreed first, every fire union in the province goes to the municipality and asks for the exact same terms and conditions as other communities were granted. And when it goes to arbitration, if the city says, no, 24-hour shifts can't be done. But once it's granted by one community, you really can't have much of an influence in blocking it. With fire services specifically, they are allowed a 7-hour rest period during their shift. I don't think anyone else in police or nursing would have the benefit of that same piece. But again, that's something that was agreed to, and I say more than 40 years ago, but it's entrenched in the contract. And things like that, once they're agreed to, they cannot be removed. And you do the best you can to work around the agreements and the legislative requirements, but there is not a lot that you can do other than lobby the province to consider changes. On the police side, the police board at the end of the day has the ability to levy the city. We may have some concerns. We might not agree with everything that comes out from it. Deputy Mayor Maggie Horsfield, Mayor Peter Churko both sit on the board and have input at the board level. But as an example, there were 10 officers hired last year, and they expect to hire another 5 more this year. And first reaction was that seems like a huge increase in staffing. But reality is they have over 20, I think it's 22, 21 officers off on PTSD leave, essentially at full salary. So we're not meeting the policing needs in the community. We had to hire more. You could refuse that at the council level, but the police board has the ability to come back and say, we don't care what you say, we're requiring it anyway because it's a safety and security need in your community. And that basically trumps council's opinion at the end of the day. So I think we do everything we can to manage it effectively and work constructively with the fire and police unions. But at the end of the day, you don't have a lot of influence over it.
Oh, so Roseanne has got a comment here. So what happens when these officers return to work?
Good question. The new officers, I'm not sure what their conditions are of their hiring. Is there an opportunity to release them from their contracts after 1 year, 2 years, 4 years? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think, Chris, at some point, if I may interrupt, what happens is it rolls over to more of an insurance scenario where it's a long-term diagnoses. Like, I'm not sure many people return from that. I mean, they may, but it may be tied into more of an insurance. So you carry them for like typically you carry them for 2 years and they move off to a long-term disability.
Okay, I'm going to comment, and I'm not a counselor. If you don't mind, I want to say that mental health is really important, and that these officers and firefighters and emergency services paramedics put their lives on the line almost every day when they go out, whether it's a smoke inhalation or whenever they're called out. The police are dealing with mental health issues and addictions and domestic violence all every day, and it increased since COVID. So I personally, of course, I have a prejudice because I am married to a policeman, and once a policeman, always a policeman. And I see firsthand what policing does to people. And I'm grateful for those services. I just want to say that out loud. And you can debate with me, I don't care. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion.
So I'm just going to jump in here because, yes, it's a difficult job to do. What we can do as a community is try to solve some of the issues that they deal with daily, which is our social issues, our homelessness, our mental health, addiction, all those things that we're failing at right now. And almost every community has these challenges. But if we can start to solve some of that, then we can start to take the stress off of the police system. And I think that's the long-term goal here, is to help them. Our community needs to help them so that their jobs are less demanding on the social side and more back to doing police work, which is what they really love to do. So.
And we started, did you know, I'm going to do this. This is because council has to do this all the time. They have to, they can't say their opinion. They have to put it into a question, right? So did you know, councillors, that growing resilient neighborhoods is a project of Clean, Green, Beautiful? And that is one of the reasons we started that project, is to help. And we partner with the North Bay Police Service to try and bring neighbors together to get to know who their neighbors are, and for us to look out for each other. The police are our friends, and they need our help as well. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. Go ahead, Yvonne. Sorry.
So thank you, gentlemen, for coming in and speaking with us this morning. It's great information. So all three of you highlighted the homeless crisis issue that everybody seems to be talking about. And I think we can all agree, the experts say that the main root cause of this is mental health and addictions. And I'm just wondering if you can expand on specifics that the city is doing to tackle that issue, because I've seen many programs on this, and so many people agree that, housing is important for sure, but unless we start throwing more resources at mental health and addictions, the actual cause of most of this, that the housing is almost secondary to this. I'm just wondering if you can expand on initiatives that are going on.
Anyone? Go ahead, Chris.
So happy to talk to it a little bit. I'm not on mute. No, I'm not. Okay. So the city directly really doesn't take on that task. It's done through DSAB and in turn through NDHC. DSAB does have a responsibility to provide affordable housing. Given our population, I think our requirement is about 1,100 units overall in the community. But that's people who might be on ODSP, Ontario Works, who can't afford market rents. So we are required by the province to provide social housing. The gray area that we get pushed back and forth on is, it's one thing to provide housing to people who need a bit of a subsidy on their income, but it's another to provide housing where you need security, because people get up in the middle of the night and start fighting with each other. They are using potentially either on the site or near the site push, the challenge has been, how do you meet the needs without providing health care, which really should be a provincial responsibility, and that has been a challenge. So we're doing what we can to provide accommodations. Everyone needs them. That's an important requirement. But we've been having problems getting funding for the operating costs from other levels of government. So that's starting to improve because I think they realize the importance to it. But when you close a facility like the North Bay Psychiatric Hospital years ago, and you don't provide supportive group homes where people can help prepare meals, provide supervision, and you just drop them into the community, give them a place to stay, you're not meeting all the needs. So we are working on that. We're doing what we can. It's a very open-ended issue, a very small piece of this, but it's frustrating nonetheless, because North Bay has been doing fairly well in providing those services. If you talk to some of the people involved with the crisis center, transition house, the Lowery shelter, because we're doing reasonably well compared to other communities in Northern Ontario, it's called Greyhound therapy. They are literally sending people to our area and taking up accommodations that would otherwise go to people in our immediate area of concern. One of my favorite phone calls about 2 years ago when we had when we were opening the Lowery shelter was a phone call from the Kingston Penitentiary. They were releasing someone on probation. Could we set aside a room for him at the Lowery shelter? No, this is a district social services program where you're not trying to meet provincial healthcare needs. So, we are making progress through Northern Pines, through the Lowery shelter, DSAB contracts, the crisis center. We oversee transition house. There are outreach programs that we support as well. We're doing what we can, but it's very much an open-ended issue. And the other thing I mentioned, everyone is, if you have concerns with North Bay, please drive through downtown Sudbury.
Oh,
Okay.
But overall, compared to many other Northern Ontarios, we are actually doing reasonably well.
So I'm going to jump in here now, Chris. So the question was, what is the city doing? So it's not well publicized yet, but we do have a community safety and well-being plan that was drafted about a year ago through DSAP, and we also hired an community safety well-being officer, which is Brent Kalinowski. So he's slowly working behind the scenes on all these issues, trying to get people together to solve them. And so we also, as I mentioned, the city, we're setting up a ad hoc committee of councillors to help move this issue along and advocate. But it's one of our goals is to have an open house on this issue within the next couple months, where Brent will also present and be available to tell you what we're doing. There is some stuff that's kind of confidential behind the scenes that's being worked at to try to help improve the outreach program downtown. Part of our problem with outreach and various agencies is they kind of close up shop at 4:30 on Fridays, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of resources available to help people during the off hours. And so that's being looked at again to see how we can increase coverage 24/7, because there's a lot of stuff that falls through the cracks during those times. So there is stuff that we're working on, but I agree with Chris. Even though it's a provincial responsibility, there are things that City Hall can do, and kind of. Okay, Chris, go.
we've had Brent Kalinowski on as a guest, and it was very informative. So thanks, Gary, for reminding us about that. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I'll let Jamie go first, but
Oh, sorry, Jamie. Sorry. Go ahead.
Before joining council, I was the co-chair of the local Ontario Health Team. So the Ontario Health Team, the Ministry of Health and the province have restructured how they're doing business. So you remember they collapsed the LINs. Now there's less LINs. So now the way they're organizing themselves is that they have the ministry, which is kind of the mothership. Each geography or each area has an Ontario Health unit. So we have our Ontario Health is Ontario Health North that covers basically from Huntsville to Manitoba. It's the largest geographic area. And then in each region, in each little district, they have an Ontario Health team. And the Ontario Health team's job is to understand what the priorities are for the region, in order to ultimately the money will flow to them, to different agencies. So why that's important is because there's a lot of people and a lot of organizations that there's some overlap, or there's some almost a competitive atmosphere for clients, and how they, well, this person gives out needles, yeah, but this person gives out, or this group gives counseling, yet this group gives this. So the ultimate goal of the health team is to make that a much delivery model, which will mean if they're holding the purse strings, they can now, sort of maybe potentially collapse some of these services into one unit, so we can, instead of paying, 2 or 3, CAOs or CEOs, there's, we can really make it much more concise and more money going to the front line, as opposed to the administrative backbone that's required to deliver healthcare. And it is immense, which will really help. But, we got people tripping over each other. My concern with the city one is that there's not been at this point, they haven't really agreed on how they're going to deal with the duplication, because Ontario Health Team does some of those groups, do the navigation, they do some of this work, they do community safety. Now we've got another group, in the city that's going to do that. So now how is that going to collapse? How are we going to work with that? So, I mean, it's slow, but I think I agree with Gary and Chris that, things are being done, but it's just not at the pace that people really would like to see. And I think that's a function of the bureaucracy, legislation, and funding models, because funding in healthcare is really program based. It's not, there's a certain pot of money for hip replacements. There's a certain pot of money for, eyes. There's certain, and once they, that's how you get funded. It's not, they don't treat it holistically. It's based on a program or a diagnosis, which, there's people with multiple issues: homelessness, addiction, mental health. Then they gotta try and navigate those services. And so it is very complex when it comes to that. So, lots going on, but it is a long game, and it's a very complicated game, but there are people that are on it.
We've had the Ontario Health Team on as well. And, but I don't know about anybody else, but just navigating this, all these changes every 4 years with a new government, and then, it's tough.
Mhm.
I don't know how people do it. I don't know how homeless people could do it. I don't know how older adults can do it, because I don't know. It's not easy. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Harriet. So speaking to a couple of points, including how do you manage your policing costs? This was a discussion that started under Chief Paul Cook about 8 years ago. One of the situations that comes up frequently is someone acting out in public. They're off their medications or doing something that's inappropriate.
And not either, by the way.
Yeah, but it was always a police armed response, which is expensive and not always appropriate. But that's where Brent Kalinowski first came into the city on a contract basis. He'd done a similar program in northern Saskatchewan. So he came to North Bay, and once they identified an individual, they would try to bring together all of the support services. Does he have income? Does he have healthcare? What can we do to get this individual on the right track? So that's a program that's been expanding in the city. We now have outreach workers on a regular basis that do try and identify homeless individuals and what are your needs.
That's the community. That's a hub, right? Is that the hub?
No, I'm not gonna say this is just an outreach program from DSAB and the Crisis Center. Years ago, 40 and 50 years ago, the number of people that were homeless in North Bay and had issues, say with alcoholism as an example, In North Bay citywide, we're probably about a dozen or less. A year ago, when DSAD did our point in time count, they actually try and count and identify the individuals in the community who are homeless, have addiction issues. The count was over 200. This year, they're actually trying to attach names to the numbers so they can track their treatment. Here's the individual's name. Here's his medical history. Does he take his medications? Is he non-compliant? They're trying to manage more specifically everyone who's involved. And just if I could mention, on the after hours service, a lot of it does fall to the police. If someone calls in a complaint about something happening, but the crisis center and transition house, when they have rooms, they will try and find accommodations for that person. And if they don't, the crisis house on Castle Street does have the authority to direct them and provide accommodations in motels. And as some people have noticed in the media in the last week or so, that's a significant cost in the community. 2 years ago, we hoped that the Lowery shelter would reduce some of those costs. But as the number of people in our community are growing, unfortunately, those costs have increased rather than gone down, even with the addition of the Lowery shelter and now the Northern Pines Transition House. So no question, it's a growing challenge.
Okay, there's a question here. What is the holdup with the proposed wellness center on Lakeshore Drive? I think they're talking about Canadore here.
You're talking about the old Farquhar site,
Yeah,
which
that's the Canadore College thing.
which I can tell you that on the Ontario Health team, well, when I was there, I actually had concerns about that opening down there because it sits outside the system. So it brings people for treatment. Then you do your 90 days. Then where do you go? Well, there's no integration into post-treatment support. So you're bringing people here, good on you, to try and help them through that. But you get through their program, and then where do they go? So, there's some more work that I think that has to be done there. And, that often with this addiction is, you can get them potentially off the meds or off the, whatever they're on. But they haven't got to the root cause of why they're there. And so when you start to associate people, then the self-medication is the only route, because you haven't really tackled what the root cause of that issue is. And the way addiction, really is that you're on a high, and then as you come down, you're in tremendous pain. There's a lot of pain involved, physically, mentally, and that little window is your opportunity to when they're vulnerable, to build a relationship, to try and get to that, get to that trauma, or get to where they need. But they get below to a certain, they'll do anything to get out of that pain, thieve, break and enter, whatever they have to do, and then they reuse and they're back up at the top again. So the problem with the situation, it's not a 9 to 5 issue. That window could be at 2 a.m, or it could be 2 p.m. So the 24-hour aspect of it, to start to build that relationship and to catch them and to try and get to them and to make some inroads, is a very limited window that could happen any time. So, to Gary's point about closing up shop at 4:30, it's not just about managing it, it's about the available supports in that, when you're involved in that lifestyle.
Jamie, that question came from me. Thank you. And I should have realized that. I did know it was a Canadore project. But would the city consider forming a partnership with Canadore in order to make that project work?
Chris, go ahead.
And sorry, Debbie, just if I can jump in for 2 seconds. So really just repeating some of Jamie's concerns, the money, the province is committed to flowing the money through Canadore, which is by itself is interesting. It's an addictions program. It's not going to be just for local residents. This will be treating people from Northern Ontario, from well outside the community. So that is a concern. So we're bringing people into the community, Why is it being hosted by an education complex rather than the hospital? Now, to some degree, because North Bay is a mental health regional facility, people also come into the North Bay Regional Healthcare Center. They receive acute care for whatever their situation is. They receive psychiatric treatment. They are prescribed medications, but often they don't go back to their communities because they've got the care here. They don't want to leave it. And there is no money from the province to address the ongoing costs that those individuals are bringing into our community from outside. So the addiction treatment center needed, but there are concerns that this is healthcare. But why is it being funded through the college when it should be through the hospital? And that it's regional, it's not local, is another situation as well. So just an example of how we face these challenges of more pressures being put on the municipal budgets that should be on healthcare budgets.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for clearing that up, Chris and Jamie. Wow, that's an eye opener. Thanks.
So I'm just going to jump in a little bit and comment on two things. So number one, the project down on Lakeshore is you mentioned has no traction, right? Nothing's happening in that building. And it would take a change of use of the building, and it also might need a environmental study because it was a it was a car dealership and a repair shop and stuff like that. So it's got a lot of work to do before it would ever start to be built in that sense. So I'm not holding my breath on that one, that anything's going to happen anytime soon. So anyway,
Okay,
it's kind of out of our hands, right?
we have to stop, and I want to say thank you to our 3 councillors, and this is very valuable for us. We've been inviting councillors in forever, right, Chris?
Forever.
We
since
get
I
a,
had
we get
full
a,
hair.
we get a, it's nice to have that direct contact, and we're doing it through the, the technology, but it means a lot to us, and we appreciate that you take the time to address some of these issues. So thank you very, very much, everybody.
And sorry, here, to make one quick suggestion. If you really want to get a good person to talk about homelessness and what the community is doing to address it, I would try and get Catherine Matheson in at some point. She's the CAO of DSAB. We've been very fortunate to have her. I think she's going to be retiring in a couple of years, but she will very much have left her mark on the community in addressing social issues by the time she leaves. So if you get a chance to hear from her, yeah.
Can you maybe pave the way for us a little bit for
Sure.
that?
Yep, sure.
Okay, I would appreciate that, Chris.
I'm glad.
So just wanted to let everybody know tonight at City Hall, it's Chamber After Hours or Business After Hours. And we're going to be launching Community Clean, Green, Beautiful and Communities in Bloom. So watch for that in the paper and on the news, and announcing our wonderful partnership with all the institution, the municipality and residents. So, and business, I got to remember. Okay.
And I'm at our board meeting with Chris.
Ah,
Or Castle Arms board meeting. Yeah, we picked.
oh, okay. No, that's okay. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
I'll send the email out this week. We're walking at Champlain Trails. If anybody is going, any hands up? Anybody?
I'll be going.
1, 2. Okay.
I'll be going. Carolyn here.
You're
going.
on, okay.
Okay.